In September 1977, NASA launched the Voyager 1 spacecraft. It finished its mission observing Jupiter and Saturn in 1980. However, in 1990, at the request of astronomer Carl Sagan, the Voyager 1 spacecraft was turned around while it was 6.4 billion kilometers from Earth. It took a picture of planet Earth caught in a ray of sunlight. The Earth was less than 1 pixel in that photograph. The Earth showed up as a pale blue dot. Most of that picture is nothing. This is the story of life on that pale blue dot. Hello to everyone and welcome to this latest episode of Life on the Pale Blue Planet. This is episode number 11. We've hit double digits. And thank you to everyone who has made it this far, to everyone who is listening on Spotify and is following and watching on YouTube. Today's podcast is a sort of completion of a bit of a theme that has run through the episodes, and just as a warning that this is a dark and confronting episode. It will be discussing some themes about mental health, depression and suicide. If that is something that you find upsetting, please make sure that either you avoid this episode, or if you do watch and listen to this episode and you are upset, that you do get appropriate support at the end of it. Previous episodes, I have touched on some problems that I've had in my life. We talked about the effect of the bullying that I experienced. We've also talked about the malicious gossip and the effects it had on me more recently. To tie the ends up, I basically want to talk about my mental health issues and how all these factors played into my mental health issues, and to also give a bit of an idea of what it was like living with depression and some of the effects it had ongoing, and just to give you some insight into how life panned out for me. Now, this is my experience. I can't say that this is the experience of other people who have gone through depression and psychological injury. I can't say that other people with issues will get the same results that I had through the treatments that I had. Psychological conditions are very individual journeys and need to be managed individually. So what has worked or may not have worked for me may not work for somebody else. So again, if you are having those conditions, I do implore you to seek individual treatment to help you carry on. Okay, let's get going. So, when did my depression start? Looking back, it actually is quite possible it started at 9 years old with that intense bullying that I suffered back then. The feeling, that lack of self-esteem, that terrible feeling about my self-worth, look, that possibly could have been depression, anxiety. It would have been really hard to have made a diagnosis back then of what I was actually experiencing. But that is quite possible. Certainly there was a change in me and my change in behaviour from before 4th grade to basically my life after 4th grade. After that, there was even, looking back, thoughts about suicide in the ensuing year or two. I didn't understand what suicide was, and I had no concept of it. But looking back, I do realise there were thoughts along the life of what would happen if my life just ended for it, and just thoughts along those ideas of ending my life. So possibly there was, some sort of thoughts about suicide, not actually doing it. It was just thoughts about the concept, and something that as 10 or 11-year-old I just didn't really understand. There was also, I know for a period there, there was a recurring dream that came on. I remember it quite well, and I remember the people involved in the dream, because they were classmates and sort of my main tormentors. And basically in that dream it always ran out the same, that this main protagonist and the classmates, basically they all ran at me, they're all armed with swords, and basically they killed me and cut me up for it. I think that was a metaphorical slicing as well as a physical one for it. And that was a dream I had on a number of occasions over a couple of years for it. I think that indicates there may have been some issues back about then. So in the sort of accompanying years, how did that present? Because it probably was a variation in mood. Sort of a case of, you may not have been the happiest person all the time, a little bit of irritability and crankiness. Now, this is interesting as to how maybe this fed into my social life, because I always thought there was a time between the two. So was I lacking in friends because I was this irritable, unhappy, cranky person? Or, did the lack of friends cause me to be that way? Or did it become a sort of self-perpetuating cycle where there's sort of a beast that fed on each other? Later on, the symptoms sort of developed a sort of brain fog. I remember that sort of probably more coming around year 11, 12. There was just this brain fog where I could just not think. I could sit in class and I'd just totally tune out. I just didn't understand what the teacher was saying. I could look at things and just could not comprehend what I was reading, and just had really no idea what was going on for it. It was quite amazing I actually got through year 11 and 12 as well as I did, with those periods of just having no comprehension of what I was being taught, no understanding of the classes, and really struggling to understand essay questions. Only occasionally, thankfully, exam questions, but more so class essays. It's also about that time, and I think developed the lack of sleep. So there was some insomnia started around that year 11, year 12 period. Mood was, again, just probably a little bit flat. Didn't get excited by too many things. Actual depressed, feeling blue, occasionally. So there was nothing really major at that period. So then I actually had a year away from school and spent that working in the public service in a new environment, and actually had a good year because it was like a whole new environment, clean slate, met some good people, had a really great year, and left that to go to university, and almost looking back wondered, why did I leave such a good situation? And just think about how things would have been had I continued on working and stayed put, and what would have happened then. But that was the choice I made. University, again, was a struggle. The brain fog wasn't too bad. It was only very occasional during uni. The insomnia was a big issue, the lack of sleep, and just being perpetually sleep deprived, yet still having to get up, show up, do the hours at university, get everything done. And somehow managed that, got through the course really well with reasonable grades through that course. And again, the brain fog really didn't seem to come in during the exams, thankfully. It only turned up a couple of times. How was I? Look, was I the happiest outgoing person? Probably not. I know there was, again, some issues there with how I was perceived and not ever really fitting into the group and my year. It was interesting that sort of lived on off campus at a student accommodation at a local hospital, and a lot of the other people there were actually the year below me in the physio course. And so I got to spend a lot of time with those people, and I probably, through having to get to know them, got on a lot better with those people because they actually got to know me, whereas most of my year had made the decision they didn't want to get to know me. And yeah, he was just a boring, silly kid from Canberra. Yeah. Anyway, got through that, and we got back to finish the course, got back to Canberra, started work in Canberra, and there were some issues in the department that I worked in, the physio department of the hospital. It was very common at that time to have physio departments that discriminate against male staff, and this department appeared to be one of them. And so, suffered some problems through there. Again, was probably having the insomnia still persisted, but socially not too bad. Again, I was living with the accommodation, so living with people, so there was some degree of social contact and some social life, and there was some outside it, and through the staff, and things weren't probably too bad, but the stress of working, the new environment, and some work pressures came on a bit. Anyway, later on moved on from there, worked a few other places, and eventually started my own business, which worked for 10 years. Now, the depression was probably coming on somewhat during that 10 years, and it presented as much as a feeling of just pressure. Time seemed to go really fast. I also felt like I was behind the clock, racing to do things, never had time to finish things. If I had to make a business decision, I just felt I had to make it then and there. There was this incredible pressure. I think I did develop some irritability. I did develop some crankiness, apparently. I'm told I made staff cry, which was terrible to hear that sort of thing. Outside of work, socially was quite variable, but there was started developing a habit of just going home to an empty house. For a number of years, I have shared houses, but a number of years I have lived alone. And particularly when living alone, this was a really hard part, because you sort of come home to what I called, I'm now in Gregland. So Gregland was where there was nobody. There was no one to talk to, and away from work I may not see people and may not have talked to people for a weekend or for days. I recall there were days when I basically, it was a weekend and there was no work or nothing actual to do. I was just stuck on the couch watching Foxtel. I could not move off the couch. I just could not get my act together to get up and do things. I couldn't leave the house, and yet being in the house was just like this awful place to be. One of the parts of depression, and it is really interesting that although I had insomnia, it was also sleep was my greatest gift. When I was asleep, I didn't have to deal with things. Waking up each morning was almost an unhappy experience because of the case of realising, okay, time to start holding my shit together. And now I've got to try and get up and get myself together, and pretty much it was walking out the front door was, okay, I'm now putting on the brave face, I'm going to pretend everything is good, act really well, until I walk through this door again tonight. And that's what you did. And that's what I had been doing. I did that from 9 years old. I would make sure I stopped before I got home and composed myself so that when I got home, everything looked okay. And I put on that brave face that there was nothing wrong. And that was a facade I put up for so many years, and a behaviour that I learned was put on the happy face, keep it all together, lose your shit when you possibly get home, and that would be the bad time. So that energy to try and hold everything together and keep that great facade of happiness and being good drained and took so much energy that you really did feel worn out at times. And I think that was part of why some of these days happened when I couldn't leave the house. I just run out of energy. I just had nothing left. I could not go out and face the world and look good. I think it particularly hindered at that stage I was refereeing football, and it had a marked effect on that in as much as I couldn't handle players who would come and argue with me, and I would just take it as almost a personal attack and just went back to 9-year-old Greg and here's these people attacking me again, and I just didn't handle it well, so it just made some bad decisions and didn't perform on the field as anywhere near as well as I could. It sort of turned up as a little short burst of argument that got really upset in almost road rage, and there'd just be these little moments of I'm really angry, hit the horn, and that get it back together. So I think that anger and that pent up disappointment, frustration just occasionally came out for it. But mostly I kept things together, kept on the happy face. I worked, I did things. Obviously the lack of a relationship was a continuing burning pain, and that was definitely a source of like a little burning hole that gnawed away from me, and sort of that varied at times. That lack of meaningful relationships and friends drifting in and out. So it got to a stage when finally I stopped living this life of somewhat denial, or realising I couldn't keep this facade going, and eventually stopped being a man who doesn't admit he has problems, and admit I have depression and I finally need to do something about it. So it started off with going to my GP, was prescribed medication, which I can say in my case did work well. It also meant going and starting with a psychologist. So my 35th birthday was my first visit to a psychologist, who was great, and came up with this idea there was social phobia and social anxiety, and looked at ways to treat them, so reorganised thinking. So it was called cognitive behavioural therapy, and a lot of the problem I had was this really disordered negative thinking about things. I would almost look for negative comments, look for negative aspects in people to sort of almost reinforce, yes, I see they don't like me, that proves that they don't like me, they've done something. And I had a lot of ruminating, thinking about bad times, a lot of negative self-talk, the self-doubt in there, and just things that still were harking back to 9, 10, 11 years old were still part of my behaviour, my thinking so many years later for it. And that was a great help. Unfortunately, part of that was also a prescription of some mild tranquilizers to try and help if I had some periods of an anxiety attack. Things seemed to go along real well and were positive, but then it just got to a stage where one day, obviously, I just ran out of energy and couldn't hold things together anymore. And it was a Saturday, and I'd seen some friends, and I'd gone home, and we were meant to then go out into town that night. And I don't know what happened. I just lost it all. And I ended up being just this absolute crying, bawling mess, sort of on my bed under the covers, just curled up, unable to move, just in the fetal position, just uncontrolled crying, and just a horrible feeling and pain that went on. That is something that I would hope other people don't experience. I would put it down to what is commonly called a nervous breakdown, and it probably was a small breakdown, and it was just everything welled up and came out that night. That then, what followed really was a really depressive state that lasted a short period. I was just a dark mood. Getting out and facing life was really difficult. Thankfully, I went to my GP, and at that stage increased the dose of my medication, and that kicked in and certainly brought me back to an even keel. And it was working reasonably well. Then just some ongoing pressures came with the business. There was some problems with the accountant, had not helped me out, and got hit with a big tax bill that we had no chance of paying. An aggressive tax office then came and decided to bankrupt me for it, or bankrupt the business, not me. And there was a whole nasty period that came on. And when it came to the New Year's Eve, where I found out I had been basically kicked out of my social group and basically abandoned by these people, because I was my support group, because they just decided they no longer had time or energy to give me any support. So the depression combined with the work pressure, then having the people just leave me like that, and there was a feeling that I was a problem, and that the only way to solve that problem was to take my own life. There was also just a feeling I had just failed as a person, and a pain that wasn't going away, and just to keep holding things together and just having the energy, and just felt like I just don't have that energy to keep fighting this every day anymore. So unfortunately, that was when I took that packet of tranquilizers and a glass of red wine, and just a 2-word text to these friends was just simply, no, forward. 28 pills, problem solved. And texted that, and started to sit down and have a great evening. Just slowly takes these tranquilizers and have some red wine and plan to overdose. Now, like the friends called an ambulance. They knew my address, so before I could get too many tablets into me, the ambulance arrived and basically carted me off to hospital, where I passed out, and basically the next morning, I think it was, woke up and basically was, oh, you're awake, you're okay. Oh, look, here's a number of a mental health team. If you need anything, see you later. And that was it. Footnote, those friends basically never followed up to see if I was okay, and with one exception, never heard, saw or spoke to them again. Had a couple of days before I went back to work, and went back to the everything is okay scenario. I saw my doctor. My medication was actually put up to quite a high level, and that stabilised me again for it, and sort of managed to sort things out. But things, for me, things that stage were good on the medication. I'd sort of gone through and, changed jobs, and as it went through later, and by that stage, it was going really well. But eventually came time to sort of left town and moved up to a new town, and change of scenery, that was fairly good. So I actually managed to get some good social contacts up there. Was having a nice time mostly. Still staying on the high dose of the medication. Insomnia still a bit was there. The crankiness and irritability occasionally, but that real I can't get up and face the day depression had gone by that stage, thankfully. Did I still feel occasionally blue and not overly happy? Yep. Did I still occasionally have those stuck in front of the TV days when I had nothing else to do? Yep. But things were a lot milder and a lot more even, so which was great for it. And with time, I actually managed to get off the medication. It was a case of weaned off and realised there was a mild addiction to the medication, that if I forgot to take it, I knew I'd get a real buzz in the brain. Oh, I forgot to take my tablets, and that was something that eventually I forgot to take them. I didn't get the buzz, and I knew I could stop them. So that was great. Being off medication, life went on fairly well for quite a period, and things were good. So I then had a change of scenery after the place I was working for got pretty much literally wiped out in the Newcastle flood storm event. So at the time there then became a job offer down in Wollongong, so I came down to Wollongong. And it was sort of interesting coming down here that despite knowing some people and thinking I'd fit in very well, it was a case of probably somewhere I didn't actually ever feel like I've really fitted into. Things weren't too bad. I, kept employed, kept working, and did work at one place where there was a problem where there was just this continual drip feeding of negative comments about me and inappropriate comments being made about me, and just being excluded from things where something was said one afternoon where somehow was so disappointed they were working with me, and the next day I came into work and basically had a panic attack. I surprised myself. I was just I was just frozen with this damn panic attack. It was, similar thing. Judged negatively by people. Anyway, thankfully that subsided, got over that, and that one didn't happen again. And life continued on, kept busy, kept work, sleep, sometimes it was getting quite good. It was generally getting better at that point. From someone who used to be a wonderful sleeper, sleep was mostly good. probably a little bit flat, not the happiest person. Occasionally there was just that shit, I gotta get up and look happy feeling with getting up, but that had mostly dissipated. Went on fairly well, though eventually got to a stage where it was just a feeling of sort of isolation, that there was no longer, close family, and just a lack of close friends, and that did play on my mind for a bit. The social life and just this inability to somehow make some good close friends and make a really good social circle. Anyway, as we're aware, but things continue on fairly well until, as I've discussed about, the person made a false allegation of stalking against me, threatened me with an ABO, threatened to report me to my registration board, and just placed a lot of pressure on me. And that was quite difficult to think that someone that I knew would do something like invent this story, and also the really concerned that someone who had lied was now going to possibly go and front up and make another false accusation and lie their head off to the Physio Council, which had serious repercussions for my career. That was a great deal of stress, and unfortunately it was another thing I mostly kept to myself. It then appeared that this person also was spreading the story far and wide through Wollongong, and I started being, just to use the common word, cancelled by people who I followed on social media, people that I loosely knew, people that I knew well, people that I had known very well, and it was just obvious that things were happening and my name was just being trashed around the place and people were turning against me. So this potential assault on my career, my registration, and once again just having this people turn against me, and a big number of people just turn against me, it brought back those same feelings that I failed as a person, my work is going to be taken away from me, and that I just couldn't see what was going to happen. That I could just foresee that this was going to have a collapse in my life was coming. I felt basically, if you watch the show Survivor, I had been voted off the island. So it was time to take my leave. And so my plan was then to walk up to Mount Kira. There's a lookout here. I used to love lookouts. Walk up there at night. I was going to just watch the sunrise the next morning, beautiful view, and then just walk off into the bush, find a nice tree, lie down and not come back. That was my plan, to escape what I saw was coming, this impending doom, this impending collapse in life, and I just thought, I just can't face this again. So was I actually depressed at that time? I couldn't say I was feeling depressed. Was it anxiety? I think it was being overwhelmed, and it was just the fear of what I saw was going to come, and it was going to be something I couldn't handle. As the universe would have it, on my way up Mount Kira, there was a sign saying road ahead is closed. So, and I thought that meant just beyond where I was closed, and I wouldn't be able to get to the lookout and to what I was planning to do. So thankfully for that, I actually turned around and walked back down the road and wandered around aimlessly, and then eventually took myself to Wollongong Hospital and just said, I think I need to see someone. And through that process, just finally got to speak my story and say what was going on. Part of that, there was concern, so I ended up being locked up in the psych ward. So I spent a day or two locked up for my own safety. But through just having to basically repeat your story, what's going on, managed to sort of get things out and get stuff off my chest and let stuff out that I'd just bottled up, and finally just realised how stupid it all was, how dumb I'd been. It wasn't really all that bad. How I'd just given control of my life to the feelings of other people, and what a stupid thing that was to do. Unfortunately, that was a behaviour that had that was my 9-year-old behaviour and 10-year-old behaviour. It recurred again in my 30s, and guess what? It occurred again. So it was a great recognition of things. It was time to then go and use all the skills I had learned, go back on, review the self-help work I'd been doing and really getting those books again. I must admit, I did have to spend a month on tranquilizers just so I could get some sleep, and probably one of the best months of sleep I had, because it just stopped. It gave me a month to stop that negative talk in my head from going on. It gave me a chance to get some clean air, get to clear my thoughts, and get to reevaluate and get on that positive aspect again. So it has been a case of rebuilding myself. It's been a case of making a transformation, and to realise that holding things in don't work. Doing the be a man and don't admit your problems doesn't work. Being afraid of speaking up, when speaking up is a lot less scary than the alternative. Being able to then decide I will never give away control of my life to the thoughts of other people, to realising how stupid that was, and to that decision to take back control of my life. There are many steps that are required in this transformation to get a me that is going to not hit this situation again, that will handle the situation properly, will not have this depressed state, and will not ever think that that is a viable choice again. Realising the pattern of behaviour that has gone on. Being able to talk about it to some other people, trying to put some support groups together. This has been what it has entailed to get out of it. It has been a horrible feeling. It certainly is something where you do lose control of yourself. You feel you don't have control. And I guess for many people that idea of suicide is just a case of this is how they can take control of their life. Something they do have control of, and it sounds ironic that ending their life is how they can take control of their life. What support did I get after that semi-suicide attempt? I would love to say I had people rallied around me and provided a great amount of support. Sadly, that wasn't the case. It appears now that still mental health is an issue that no one wants to deal with. So it has been still a very individual process of rebuilding myself. I have since joined a men's group where we get to sit and talk, and that has been great for the support that it gives and being able to actually have some conversation. And I'm now sort of working to force myself to go to other social events and get out and do things for it. Hitting the point where you feel you want to take your life is the lowest you can get. That's the only benefit. That anything after that has to be upwards. It has to be an improvement. You cannot get any lower. I am a project that I'm working on. I'm trying to get some support from other people to work with it, but mostly I realise it's a job I have to do myself, and I am working really hard on it, and my plan is to become a much better person as a result. And once I go a little bit further, my further plan is then to see how I can help other people in the same situation, to try and become some better people, look at some tools to help themselves, and always be that sounding board for other people. So my closing messages for this one would be, particularly if you're a male, stop holding to that stupid idea of masculinity that you have to be invincible and your health doesn't get talked about. You keep it in, you keep that great façade going up. It doesn't work, and that is why men are suiciding, because they just won't talk, they won't seek help, they won't admit they have an issue. Don't give control of your life to other people. Seek to control your life, your thoughts and your thinking. As soon as you've given control of your life to other people's reactions and thinking, and you've lost control, you're in a downward spiral. And thirdly, we need to, as a society, be able to give support to people who have mental health issues. We need to know how to treat people that do have it. We need to know how to talk to them. I think it's great, I'll give you support. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to. I'm scared to talk to this person. What if I say the wrong thing? And I think the reason people aren't out there supporting is they are scared. They don't know how to give support. So promoting the role of educating people on how to support people who do have mental health issues, how to be that friend, what you need to do, not to be frightened of giving support and talk to that person. So that is my plan going forward. With that, I will be planning to launch a new project, and we'll rebrand and launch some podcasts which will focus on that very point about how to become better humans and examples of people who have overcome and become better humans. So watch out for that one. This will be the last podcast on YouTube in this series as a result. As I said, it completes the sort of story, it completes our arc. So I'm happy to have put this one in the can and to have said the piece. So thank you to everyone who has followed this far, has watched this series, has listened to these stories. The new series will eventually come out under the title The Better Humans Project, and it will be a far more positive, uplifting and practical guide following some of my own experience into becoming a better human and into encouraging other people to do the same. So again, thank you to everyone who has made it this far, has sat through this one. Yes, it's been difficult. Please consult some appropriate advice or counselling if this has upset you. And I thank all of you who have watched and tuned in. And I hope to see you on the new YouTube channel and podcast channel in about a month or two. Until then, thank you. Please spread the word. Bye-bye.